Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift into something strange, something most of us have felt but can never quite explain. You know the moment, you walk into a room and suddenly you've forgotten why, a thought you just had vanishes like breath on a mirror. And it makes you wonder, where did it go? Did it fall into some corner of your mind, waiting to be picked up again? Or did it dissolve completely, like it was never real in the first place? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. A memory goes missing. That's how it starts. Not a dramatic erasure, no flickering, no grand goodbye, just a gentle unthreading. 1 second it's there, your keys, the name of that actor, that thing you swore you wouldn't forget, and the next moment, it isn't. You sit there, half smiling, trying to replay your own mind like an old VHS tape. You rewind, pause, squint at the static. Nothing. It's gone. But is it really? The brain, for all its folds and fire, doesn't have a trash bin, not in the way your phone does. There's no deleted items folder you can peek into, but there's also no hard delete. What you call forgetting, this strange everyday magic, isn't destruction. It's more like a fading, a dimming light. Scientists call it transience, the natural, graceful decay of memory over time. You live your days, you gather moments, and your mind, delicately, without asking, lets some of them go. Not because they weren't important, but because your brain is constantly trying to make space for what is. Imagine a crowded library where the shelves keep rearranging themselves. Some books stay, others get tucked deep into corners, and a few lose their covers altogether. You don't always get to choose which ones, but here's the part that stays with you long after midnight. The fact that forgetting is necessary, not a glitch, not a flaw, but something almost kind. Your mind is trying to protect you from overwhelm. Too many memories, too many inputs, and everything starts to blur, so it lets go. That moment earlier today, when you hesitated at a familiar face but couldn't place the name. That wasn't failure, that was economy, precision, a quiet act of survival. But forgetting doesn't always feel kind. Sometimes it stings, like when you remember you've forgotten something important. A birthday, an apology, the way someone's voice sounded when they were still here. There's a kind of grief in forgetting, a soft, low ache that settles in your chest and doesn't really ask permission. You start to realize how memory is tied to identity. If you forget something about your past, do you lose a part of who you are? If a tree falls and no one remembers the sound, did it still echo? You wonder this as you lie there, blinking at the ceiling. Your brain, though, doesn't wonder. It's busy, always pruning, reshaping, layering. It stores your life not in clean labeled folders, but in webs, complex, messy, beautiful webs, where scent and sound and feeling are all tangled together. That's why a song can make you cry without warning. Why a certain type of rain makes you think of childhood. The memory didn't vanish, it was just sleeping somewhere deeper. It comes back not when you call it, but when something else stirs it awake, and that's the strangest thing about it. You don't always know what you know. Memory is not a neat stack, it's more like fog, hovering. Some parts are dense, others barely there. You can walk through it, reach out, feel something brush against your fingertips, and then nothing. And yet the act of remembering feels so simple. You just recall something, like opening a drawer, but you never really open it on your own. Your brain does it for you, silently, like an unseen librarian sliding a book across the table just when you need it. So when you forget, it's not that the drawer is empty, it might just be that the librarian is asleep, or perhaps the drawer is jammed, or maybe, just maybe, the memory was never stored clearly in the first place. Because storing a memory isn't like taking a photo, it's more like painting a picture with water on a dusty window. You see it clearly at first, and then slowly, it fades. You think back to moments you thought you'd never forget, the sound of your school bell, the smell of your first apartment, the details of someone's face from long ago, and you realize they've blurred around the edges, not erased, just softened. That's the truth of forgetting. It's not loss, it's transformation. Even now there are neurons in your brain rewiring themselves, letting go of one connection, reinforcing another. That conversation you had 3 days ago may be dissolving, but the feeling it gave you, that might linger, because memory isn't just fact, it's texture, it's warmth. It's that faint pulse behind your thoughts, shaping the way you see everything else. So the next time something slips from your mind, let it go with softness, let it fall like a leaf, not with panic, but with peace. Because in the quiet spaces left behind, there's room for new stories to settle in. You don't forget because you're broken, you forget because you're human, and in that forgetting, there's something oddly beautiful. Inside your head, there is no actual room full of drawers, no neat little labels that say first kiss, bike crash, or last Tuesday's breakfast. But it sure feels that way sometimes, like your brain is a warehouse, a vast and humming archive of everything you've seen, heard, smelled, touched, thought. You imagine pulling open a drawer and retrieving a memory like an old postcard, worn but waiting. But what's really there is stranger, softer, messier. Your brain stores memory in patterns, networks of neurons that fire together, whispering across synapses. Every time you remember something, you're not calling up a file, you're recreating it, piecing it together like a puzzle made of flickering signals and tiny electrical storms. There are no single spots where memories live, instead they sprawl. The face of your friend might sit in one part of your brain, the sound of their voice in another, the feeling of being with them in yet another place altogether. And somehow, in less than a heartbeat, your mind stitches it all together into one whole image, like a silent orchestra playing in perfect sync. It's called distributed storage. A memory is not a thing, it's a pattern, a song played by many instruments at once. That's why it's so fragile. If one part falters, the whole thing can sound off. Still, your brain does have its backstage crew, special places that help it manage memory. The hippocampus, for instance, shaped like a seahorse and deep inside your brain, helps form new memories. It's like the scribe of your story, jotting down what matters most before the ink dries. Then there's the prefrontal cortex, the conductor, deciding what's worth remembering and what isn't. And even then, not all memories are created equal. There are two main kinds, explicit and implicit. The ones you can describe, like what you had for lunch or the time you broke your arm, that's explicit. The ones that shape how you move, how you react, how you feel a certain way when you smell cinnamon but don't know why, that's implicit. You might forget the moment your mother taught you how to tie your shoes, but your fingers never did. That memory lives in your body, not your thoughts. And even within explicit memories, your brain plays favorites. There's semantic memory, facts, knowledge, the stuff you'd use in a quiz. Then there's episodic memory, your story, the time you tripped in the hallway and laughed until your ribs hurt, the look on someone's face when they told you they were leaving, the first time you realized you liked the sound of rain. Episodic memories feel the most vivid because they're coated in emotion. That emotion helps tag them as important. It's the brain's way of saying, remember this one, this mattered. And those tags are often the reason you recall moments that don't seem important logically, but meant something to you. Of course, memory isn't always reliable. Even in that careful filing system, things get bent, misplaced, changed. A memory might be reinforced every time you recall it, but that act of remembering is also a chance to alter it. Each recollection becomes an opportunity for distortion, like redrawing a sketch from memory. Over time, your brain might smooth out the details, mix things up, or even add new elements, not because it's lying, but because it's trying to make sense. Your mind isn't a camera, it's a storyteller, and stories evolve. There's a strange comfort in knowing that the brain isn't trying to preserve the past perfectly, but to carry forward something useful. It's less concerned with precision, and more concerned with meaning. You sit and try to remember the last words someone said to you. You might get the wording wrong, but the feeling that lingers, and sometimes, that's all that matters. Inside your brain's filing system, access is an art. You've probably had that moment when a word sits on the tip of your tongue, just out of reach. You know it. You can feel its shape in your mind, and still, it won't come. That's retrieval failure. The memory is there, but the pathway to it is tangled. You circle around it like a moth around a porch light, hoping the right cue will bring it into view, and it usually does. Later, when you're not trying, when your brain, relaxed and meandering, decides to hand it back to you like a cat dropping a mouse on the rug. The more you understand memory, the less it feels like a vault, and more like a garden. Some parts bloom again and again, others wilt, and a few lie dormant, waiting for just the right moment, just the right light, to awaken. That's the filing system you carry inside you, not rigid, not mechanical, living, shifting. endlessly rebuilding itself, and somewhere in that tangle of synapses and silence, your memories move quietly, like wind in tall grass, there and not there, always waiting to be remembered, or not. You're sitting quietly, maybe without even realizing it, staring at a spot on the wall, or drifting in a memory that isn't quite whole. You were trying to remember something, a detail, a face, a moment, and it slipped, not with drama, just with distance, like fog thinning out the further you walk into it. That memory is not gone, not in the way people assume. It hasn't been deleted, thrown out like a used receipt. It's still somewhere, but it's dim now, blurred, softened, like a voice calling from another room. Scientists often say that memories decay, but that word sounds harsh, almost brutal. It's more accurate, and more honest, to say they fade, they lose sharpness. Like chalk drawings left in the rain, you can still see the outline, maybe, but the detail has run. This gentle slipping is what they call transience, one of the 7 so-called sins of memory, but it's not a sin at all, it's the brain's natural erosion. Over time, neural connections that aren't revisited start to weaken. The less you use a pathway, the more it fades, just like a forest trail that vanishes when no one walks it anymore. You don't forget because your brain is failing, you forget because it is prioritizing. A name you haven't said aloud in years, a password from college, the color of your childhood kitchen floor. These details haven't been pulled forward in so long, the threads holding them together have loosened. The brain is constantly weighing, do we still need this? And most of the time, the answer is no. It sounds ruthless, but it's really graceful. The brain is trying to keep you efficient, not overwhelmed. Think of all the tiny details you experience in a single day, thousands of glances, passing sounds, scraps of conversation, flickers of emotion. If your brain kept all of it, you'd drown in noise. So it curates, and sometimes, it curates away things you thought mattered. That's where the ache of forgetting comes in. You remember that feeling, when you're trying to recall someone who used to mean so much, but all that comes to mind is a vague shape, a mannerism, maybe the way they said your name. It's not enough, it doesn't feel like enough. You wonder how something so big could shrink so small, and yet, the memory hasn't truly disappeared. The neurons that once lit up together still have the potential to reconnect. It's just harder, like trying to trace your way through a path that's overgrown. You need a stronger cue now, something sensory, something emotional, to light the way. And this is where it gets interesting. Even if the memory fades, the feeling often doesn't. You might forget what someone said, but not how it made you feel. The emotion lingers, like a shadow left behind after the figure walks away. That's because emotional memories are encoded more deeply. When something truly matters to you, when it frightens you, delights you, wounds you, it sparks more activity in your brain. The amygdala, the emotional processing center, gets involved, and it tells your hippocampus, this one's important, keep it close. So those memories, the ones that made your chest flutter or your hands shake, they tend to last longer. Not always in detail, but in tone. You may forget what happened, but your body remembers the aftermath. And then there are the memories that seem to fade, but don't. They just change form. You might not remember the night you learned how to dance, but your feet do. You might not recall how you learned to recognize your father's laugh in a crowd, but you always will. These are the echoes of memories, the parts that didn't need words or snapshots. They're stored in a different way, less explicit, more embodied. Sometimes, forgetting is just the surface dimming. The roots are still there, buried beneath, waiting. And sometimes, when you least expect it, something will brush against those roots, a song, a smell, a turn of phrase, and suddenly the whole tree is there again, tall and aching, alive. It's like your memory was never gone, just sleeping. That's why forgetting doesn't feel final. Not really. Not like a locked door, more like a tide that goes out, and might someday return. Still, there's something vulnerable about it, that you can live through something, deeply, and lose access to it later. You wonder how much of your life you're carrying without knowing. What stories are still there, behind walls you don't see anymore. It makes you want to hold on to things tighter, but memory doesn't respond to force. It's not a stubborn knot you can untangle by pulling. It reveals itself when it's ready. Sometimes, never, and maybe that's okay, because in forgetting, there's room for softness, for growth, for peace. If we remembered everything, we'd never stop turning it over, never stop analyzing, replaying, rewriting. The brain knows this, and so it lets some things fall away, gently. You forget things every day, but you also remember new ones, and in between, your mind is doing something beautiful, deciding what stays, what leaves, and what simply transforms, because memory isn't a fixed archive, it's a living story, and even the pages that fade still leave fingerprints. There's a moment, usually quiet, when you lie down and try to drift off, when thoughts soften, and memories begin to blur, not fully dreams yet, just loose fragments floating by. A face from 5th grade, a hallway you haven't walked in years, a song you didn't know you still remembered. You don't summon them, they just arrive, and that's part of the strange, delicate rhythm of forgetting, because every night, as you fall asleep, your brain begins its secret work, not of holding on, but of letting go. Sleep isn't just rest, it's cleaning, a kind of quiet maintenance, like janitors walking through an empty museum, deciding which paintings need dusting, and which ones can be stored away. Your brain uses sleep to prune its memories, trimming what's not needed, and strengthening what is. It's called synaptic downscaling, a process where your brain evaluates the thousands of connections it formed during the day. Some are sharpened, reinforced, others, softly pared back, not destroyed, exactly, but dimmed. You might think of this as forgetting, but it's more precise than that. It's curation. If your waking brain is a sponge soaking in everything, then sleep is the squeeze. It wrings out the noise, keeps the meaning, and the kind of sleep matters. During slow-wave sleep, your brain replays certain patterns from the day, tiny reactivations of the neurons involved in learning and memory. It's like the brain is rehearsing, whispering to itself, "Let's keep this one." That's why sleep is so vital for remembering. But it's also when forgetting does its most graceful work, because not everything deserves to stay. Not the color of the second umbrella you passed this morning, not the license plate of the car in front of you, not the 30 ads you scrolled past on your phone. These don't vanish out of negligence, they fade because they weren't meant to linger, and your brain knows that. It keeps what matters, not what screams the loudest, but what feels the most connected, to emotion, to purpose, to you. But sleep does something even stranger. It doesn't just filter memories, it reshapes them, it helps integrate them, linking new memories with old ones, creating meaning where there was once just experience. That's why you can go to bed with a problem, and wake up with a solution, or fall asleep feeling uncertain, and rise with clarity. Your brain has been busy behind the curtain, moving pieces, rewiring connections, drawing new lines between distant thoughts, and while it's doing that, it's also tucking certain things away, gently. This isn't failure, it's design. Sleep is the brain's editor, and editors know what to cut. That's why it's so odd when you try to fight it, when you try to hold on to something, over and over, repeating it in your mind before you sleep, scared it will disappear. Sometimes, the more you cling to a memory, the more fragile it becomes. Repetition can reinforce it, yes, but stress and panic, they can scatter it, because emotion sharpens memory, but only certain kinds. Joy, fear, love, these carve deep grooves, but anxiety can muddle the signal, blurring the edges, burning the details. So the best way to keep something is sometimes to let it go for the night. Let your brain do what it's been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, sorting, softening, selecting. Even dreams, strange as they are, might be part of this process. They're not random static, they're emotional echoes, bits of memory reassembled into something new, part story, part sensation, part deep filing system, you're only barely aware of. You've probably had those dreams, where someone you haven't thought of in years appears, not as they were, but as your brain remembers them now. Or maybe a place from childhood, skewed slightly, blurred at the edges like a memory underwater. These aren't just inventions, they're resurfaced fragments, glimpses of what your mind still holds onto, in its own peculiar way. It reminds you that forgetting isn't clean, it's not binary, it's not remembered, or gone. Most memories live on a spectrum, visible sometimes, invisible others, shifting with context, mood, even time of day. You might forget something for years, and then one evening, sitting in a quiet cafe, or hearing the right chord in a song, it returns, fully, unexpectedly, as if it had been there all along, waiting behind a curtain you didn't know was there. And maybe that's what sleep does best. It doesn't delete, it archives. It moves memories into places where they won't distract you, but where they can still breathe. You won't remember most of today, not in detail, not fully,
but your brain will, and tonight while you sleep, it will decide what to keep, what to connect, what to let rest. Not out of cold calculation, but with the quiet care of something that knows you better than you know yourself. So if you forget something tomorrow, some minor detail, some word on the tip of your tongue, don't be angry with your mind. It's just doing its job, whispering to itself in the dark, sculpting the story of who you are, by deciding, gently, what doesn't need to be said anymore. You might think forgetting is a flaw, that it's some kind of personal failure, a weakness in your mental armor, but the truth is more surprising, more generous. Forgetting is not your brain failing you, it's your brain protecting you. If you remembered everything, truly everything, you wouldn't be wiser, you'd be overwhelmed. Imagine waking each day and recalling every face you've passed, every background conversation, every emotion from every fight, or awkward silence, or long-forgotten errand. The weight of all that information would crush you. You'd never be able to focus, never be able to feel the present, because the past would always be louder. That's why your brain forgets, not out of laziness, but out of mercy. Cognitive scientists call it adaptive forgetting, the process by which your brain lets go of information that no longer serves you. It's an evolutionary gift, refined over millennia. To survive, our ancestors didn't need to remember every footstep through the forest. They needed to remember the dangerous ones, the ones that mattered. The rest could be left behind. And in modern life, this instinct still holds. Your mind naturally makes space, not because it's weak, but because it's efficient. The brain is a master of triage, prioritizing memories tied to emotional significance, usefulness, and repetition. If you only did something once, and it wasn't emotionally charged, chances are, your brain quietly decided it didn't need to stay. This isn't randomness, it's curation. Your brain is constantly shaping a version of reality that allows you to move forward, letting go of old grievances, outdated facts, obsolete fears, so you can keep adapting, keep choosing, keep being present. But it's not just about clearing out the mundane. Sometimes your brain forgets things to protect your sense of self. Emotional regulation and memory are deeply intertwined. When a memory causes too much pain, too much disruption, your mind might tuck it away, not deleting it, but distancing it, creating space, buffering. You've probably felt it, the way your body stiffens around certain memories, the way some thoughts come up like thorns, then vanish again. You might not remember the full scene. Just a flicker, a sound, a tightness in your chest. That's emotional forgetting, your mind deciding, not right now. There are parts of your past that you can only revisit slowly, over time, when you're ready. And that readiness is something your brain often senses before you do. It doesn't hide things forever, but it waits for safer conditions. That's not weakness, that's survival. Because memory isn't just a mirror, it's a filter. It helps you see the world, not as it was, but as it needs to be for you to continue. Sometimes that means holding tight to a moment of joy, replaying it again and again, until it shapes who you are. Other times, it means letting something painful grow faint, not erasing it, but softening its edges. Forgetting makes room for healing, for new patterns, for becoming. And as strange as it sounds, forgetting is also how you learn. When you take in a new piece of knowledge, your brain often has to weaken or reorganize older pathways to make space. It's not destruction, it's reconfiguration. Memory is a living system, constantly rebuilding itself around the present. So every time you forget something, an old password, the layout of a house you no longer live in, the name of someone you knew years ago, it's not a crack in your memory, it's the brain saying, you don't need this right now, let's hold on to something else instead. And there's a comfort in that even when you lose details, you gain clarity. Even when you forget, you grow. It might not feel like it in the moment, especially when you fumble through introductions, or find yourself searching for a word that won't come. But even then, your brain is doing something quietly brilliant. It's reducing noise, making space, keeping you human. Because perfect memory isn't a blessing, it's a burden. People who can't forget, those with highly superior autobiographical memory, often describe it as exhausting. Their minds are crowded with days they can't escape. Every hurt, every argument, every awkward moment, preserved in full color. There's no fading, no healing through distance. You weren't built for that. You were built to move forward, and that means letting go, gently, imperfectly, beautifully. So the next time you feel frustration at forgetting a fact, a name, a moment, pause. Take a breath. Remind yourself that forgetting is not the opposite of intelligence. It's one of its most subtle forms. Your brain is editing your life, not to diminish it, but to give it meaning, to let what matters rise above the noise, to let you feel, fully, what is here, now.
Picture your mind as a vast room filled with voices. Not shouting, not chaotic, just softly murmuring. Some are louder, clearer, always at the front. Others linger in corners, half asleep. And some slip behind walls entirely, fading into a hush so complete, you begin to wonder if they were ever there at all. That's the quiet war between memory and silence, between what your brain decides to keep and what it allows to fade. Because as much as your brain is a collector, it's also a gatekeeper. It cannot hold everything, not forever. Each memory takes up physical and metabolic space. Neurons firing, synapses strengthening, proteins being built just to stabilize a thought. And there's only so much room, so much energy. The brain has limits, so it chooses, constantly, quietly, with remarkable precision. This is where interference enters the picture, one of the more mysterious forces behind forgetting. Sometimes you don't lose a memory because it faded. You lose it because something newer crowded it out. A new number replaces the old one. A new routine buries the old habit. A new face overwrites the memory of someone who once meant something. The brain doesn't erase, it overwrites, and it does so in patterns that reflect your present, not your past. That's why you remember what you do now, because those memories are tied to who you are now. The rest, those belonging to a different version of you, get gently pushed down like layers of sediment settling at the bottom of a quiet lake. Still there, just deeper. And this competition between memories isn't chaotic, it's strangely elegant. If you learn something today that contradicts what you knew before, your brain has to choose. It may try to reconcile the two, merge them, find a compromise, or it may push the old one out, not with violence but with erosion. The more you rehearse the new, the weaker the old becomes. This is why we forget things we used to know so well, not because they didn't matter, but because they no longer fit the world we live in. You might recall studying for an exam years ago, memorizing entire textbooks, cramming late into the night. But how much of that do you still remember? Maybe a few concepts, a visual here and there, the feeling of the room. But the rest, it's gone. Because your brain is not a vault. It's a tool for navigation. It keeps only what helps you move forward. That's the essence of this quiet battle. Memory isn't about perfect storage, it's about flexible storytelling. You don't need every detail, you need coherence, a sense of continuity, a narrative you can live inside. So when the brain lets something go, it's often making space for a stronger version of the story, one that makes sense now, one that reflects who you've become. And sometimes forgetting helps protect that version. Think of the mind as a delicate balance between remembering and unremembering. For every moment you hold close, there are a dozen that fall away. Not lost, not destroyed, just placed behind a curtain, out of reach, like books in a language you once knew but haven't spoken in years. And yet, sometimes they come back. That's the thing. A memory you thought was gone can return, without warning. A smell, a melody, a sudden turn of phrase, and suddenly it's all there again. The room, the air, the you who lived that moment. It's not like reading a diary. It's like stepping through a door you didn't know was still unlocked, because the memory was never truly erased. It was just waiting for the right signal to wake it up. This is the paradox of forgetting. It feels like absence, but it's often just silence. And silence doesn't mean nothing. It means something is resting. So when your mind goes blank, when a name won't come, when you're grasping for a thought that dances just out of reach, don't scold yourself. You're not broken. You're just navigating a mind built for change. And it's doing what it's always done, quietly protecting you from the weight of too much, too soon. Because in that silence, something else is being remembered. Something more important. Something more now. It's late, the house is still, and you're thinking again. Not on purpose, but in that wandering, floaty way that happens when the world gets quiet, and you're not quite asleep. A question forms, barely spoken. Why do some memories stick, while others just drift away? It doesn't seem fair. Sometimes, you remember something trivial, a jingle from a commercial, a joke someone told you years ago, the exact layout of a childhood video game, but forget what you meant to say to someone important, or where you put that envelope, or what you promised yourself you'd remember forever. Why does the brain cling to some things but not others? The answer lies in a strange and simple truth. Not all memories are treated equally. Your brain is always making choices, what to encode deeply, what to file shallowly, what to let float by. And those choices often depend not on logic, but on relevance, on emotion, on connection. When something happens that feels meaningful, it lights up your brain in ways that everyday moments don't. Emotion acts like a highlighter, a megaphone. It says, this matters, keep this, and your brain listens. A joyful surprise, a sharp fear, a moment of intense connection. These create chemical storms, bursts of dopamine and adrenaline, of cortisol and oxytocin, and those chemicals signal your hippocampus to do more than just note the experience, they signal it to etch it. This is why emotionally charged memories can feel so vivid, even decades later. They're not just preserved, they're spotlighted, stored with more detail, more clarity, more grip. You might forget hundreds of normal walks through your neighborhood, but you remember the one where someone shouted your name, or where the sky turned a strange color, or when someone walked beside you and said something that changed you. Emotion is the hook. Without it, even the most complex moment can slide past. With it, even a tiny event can leave a permanent trace. But it's not just high emotion that matters, it's also repetition. Every time you remember something, you reinforce it. You're literally rewiring it, strengthening the connections, laying down the neural path a little deeper. That's how memory is consolidated. Not all at once, but through revisiting. That's why a song from your teenage years still plays in your mind, while the thing you read yesterday might already be fading. Because you played that song over and over, you connected it to moments, people, feelings, you danced to it, or cried to it, or shared it with someone. That repetition, paired with emotion, built something lasting. Your brain isn't just recording events, it's assigning weight, importance, a sense of keep this, or let this go. And sometimes, that judgment is flawed. There are memories you wish you could forget, things that hurt, that linger longer than you want them to, moments you revisit, even though they bring you pain. The brain doesn't always get it right. It sometimes oversaves, keeps things too close. That's because emotion doesn't always mean meaning. Sometimes it just means intensity, and the brain is tuned to respond to intensity. It's why trauma sticks, and why healing takes time, not just emotionally but neurologically, because those memories aren't just mental, they're physical patterns, deeply etched. Changing them isn't just about moving on, it's about slowly rewriting the wiring, which your brain can do, but only gently, only over time. Still, the same principle applies in reverse. You can make a memory stronger by linking it to feeling, by caring, by reflecting, by telling the story again. This is why journaling helps, why talking with someone helps, why even thinking quietly to yourself in those slow nighttime moments can help. You're reinforcing the path, laying it down a little more deeply, marking it with meaning. And when you do that, when you revisit something with tenderness, it stays. So when a memory slips, it's often because it was never given that weight. It was left untouched, unfelt, unrehearsed. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't have a hook to hold it in place. That's what the brain looks for. Not perfection, not completeness, just a reason to stay. It's strange to think of your life this way, as a collection of moments that your brain has voted on. Some kept, some faded, some hidden deep. But that's what it is, a quiet election of meaning. You don't get to control every vote, but you do get to influence them, with presence, with care, with time. And that's what makes memory feel like a gift, not just because it captures what was, but because it reflects what you loved, what moved you, what mattered enough to stay. Even now in this quiet moment, you're laying down memory of this very thought, this very night, not in a loud declarative way, but gently, as a ripple. And somewhere inside, your brain takes note and decides, maybe this is worth keeping. You've likely had this happen before. A smell, maybe a dusty old book, or a stranger's cologne, catches you by surprise, and suddenly, like a wave out of nowhere, you're somewhere else, back in a childhood room, on a late summer afternoon,
walking beside someone you haven't thought of in years. It's not like remembering, it's like time folds in on itself. That's the strange magic of hidden memory. The memories we think are gone but aren't. The ones stored so deep that they need something precise, something oddly specific to bring them back to the surface. Sometimes these are ordinary memories, buried by time and disuse, but sometimes they're not. Some memories are hidden for a reason. Your brain is not just a storage device, it's also a guardian. It doesn't just record your past, it decides how much of it you're ready to live with. And when it comes to pain, your mind can be subtle. Some things, especially those tied to fear, shame or grief, don't get erased, they get suppressed, moved out of sight, not because you've chosen to forget, but because your brain has chosen to protect. This is motivated forgetting, when the mind, without your full awareness, tucks away certain memories behind emotional walls. It's not denial, it's defense, a soft kind of shielding, designed not to deceive you, but to help you carry on. You may not remember the details of an argument that left a mark, or the precise shape of someone's final words, but you carry the mood, the weight of it, in your posture, in your dreams, in the way certain moments make you feel uncomfortable, for no clear reason. That's how suppressed memory works. It lingers not in detail, but in atmosphere, not as a scene you can describe, but as a pressure you can sense. And when these memories do return, when the walls thin or crack, it's often not with clarity, but with feeling, a tightness, a flash, an image that flickers, and then disappears again. Your brain tests the waters, gently, asking, are we ready now? You might not be. That's okay, because re-remembering is not just a mental act, it's emotional excavation. You're not just retrieving information, you're re-experiencing parts of yourself you once had to silence. And this silence isn't failure, it's healing, a process that can't be rushed. That's why therapy works the way it does, not by digging, but by creating a space where the mind feels safe enough to bring things forward on its own. The brain will release what it's been holding, when it no longer fears what remembering will do. It's also why trauma can feel timeless, because suppressed memories don't age the same way. They don't fade gently like childhood routines, or forgotten phone numbers. They wait, preserved like photographs in a drawer you never open, and when they return, they feel recent, sharp, as if no time has passed at all. But your mind does this for a reason. It's always trying to balance your capacity to protect your functional life, while still holding the whole of your experience. You're not broken, because you can't remember something painful. You're still whole, you're just healing. And even the parts you can't see, those dim hallways in the mind, are still part of you. They influence the way you laugh, the way you protect yourself, the way certain faces comfort you, or certain songs make you cry, because memory is not only what you recall, it's what shapes you. It's what lingers in the way you hold your breath, when someone raises their voice, in the way you flinch at a smell, in the way your body knows, before your mind remembers. And sometimes, those buried memories aren't painful, they're just old, stored far away, in quiet corners, not because they hurt, but because they stopped being relevant. And yet, with the right key, a scent, a texture, a half-spoken sentence, they come back, fully formed, like a letter you forgot you wrote to yourself. That's the grace of the human mind. It doesn't discard the past. It simply holds it in layers, some at the surface, some deep beneath, and some waiting for the right moment to return. Not to haunt you, but to show you that you've lived, that even the forgotten parts of you are still inside, still listening, still shaping the person you've become. So if something stirs awake tonight, something you hadn't thought about in years, don't be afraid. It's not a ghost, it's just a piece of you, coming up for air. You're walking down the street, not thinking about anything in particular, when it happens, a sudden smell of baking bread, or a flicker of a song from a passing car, and just like that, your mind opens a door you didn't know was there. You're 8 again, at your grandmother's kitchen table. You're 60, leaning out of a car window on a summer night. You're back in a memory you hadn't visited in years, maybe decades, and you didn't try, you didn't concentrate, or search, it just came. That's the odd power of involuntary memory, the kind that doesn't answer when you call, but walks in unannounced. It reminds you that your memories are stored in more places than you expect, not just in the language centers of the brain, or the hippocampus, or the areas we usually think of as cognitive. They live in your senses, in the textures of your skin, in the taste buds on your tongue, in your muscles and your breath. Memory is not only mental, it's embodied. which is why you sometimes remember with your body before your mind catches up. You might get goosebumps without knowing why, or feel uneasy in a familiar place that suddenly doesn't feel right. Your body is always listening, always archiving, and sometimes it remembers before your thoughts do. This is especially true with sensory cues. A specific scent, like a certain detergent, or a kind of tree bark after rain, can act like a key. It doesn't just remind you, it unlocks you. That's because the olfactory system, the part of your brain responsible for processing smell, is wired directly into the emotional and memory centers. No detours, no filters, just a fast, powerful connection. So when a smell brings you to tears, or makes you smile with a kind of gentle confusion, it's not random, it's personal. It's a quiet part of your life, rising up through the senses, reminding you that it's still there. Taste does it too. A bite of something simple, a type of soup, a candy, a certain spice, and suddenly, you're back at a family table, or a schoolyard, or a long-lost kitchen. The taste doesn't just bring back memory, it brings back atmosphere, emotion, a moment you'd forgotten was ever yours. And then there's music. A song doesn't just make you remember, it takes you back. The beat, the lyrics, the chord progression. Your brain ties all of it to a time and place. That's why certain songs feel like time machines. They don't just echo the past, they are the past. And here's the strange part. Even if you've forgotten the specifics, the words you said, what you were wearing, what day it was, you remember the feeling, the sense of it, the emotional temperature of the moment. This is context-dependent memory, when recall depends on the environment, or the state you were in when the memory was made. Your brain likes to match cues, so if you're in a similar mood, or hear the same sounds, or taste the same thing, the memory becomes easier to retrieve. That's why some of your clearest memories appear when you least expect them. Your mind is waiting for the right door to open, and sometimes it swings wide without warning. It's beautiful, really, that your memories live in more than just thought. They live in sensation, in breath, in rhythm. They are you, even when you're not thinking about them. And this also means forgetting is not final, because if a memory can return through smell, or taste or touch, then it was never truly gone. Just sleeping, waiting for the right key. You might not remember the name, or the day, or even the place, but the feeling, that warm rush, or that sudden edge, or that dizzy, flickering smile, that's real. That's a form of memory too. Not logical, not complete, but honest. That's what matters, because in the end we don't just remember in facts, we remember in echoes, in patterns, in emotions stirred loose by the world around us. And if a part of you can come back just from the smell of pavement after rain, or the rustle of a coat in a quiet hallway, then maybe nothing is ever fully forgotten, just waiting to be remembered differently. So tonight, if something comes back unasked, unannounced, pause for a moment, let it stay, let it drift through, not because you owe it anything, but because it's part of you, still alive, still here. You're sitting across from someone, and their face feels familiar, but the name doesn't. It hovers, somewhere in the back of your mind, teasing you with its nearness. You smile politely, nod along, buying time. Inside, a quiet search party has been sent out. The brain is flipping through its files, tapping its metaphorical fingers, muttering, I know this one. And then, hours later, when you're brushing your teeth, or walking down the stairs, it appears, out of nowhere, just there, the name. This quiet struggle, between recognition and recall, is one of the most frustrating, and strangely common, experiences we share. You know the feeling, you remember the shape of something, the rhythm of it, but not the full detail. The brain knows, but it won't tell you, at least, not right away. That's because remembering isn't just retrieval, it's reconstruction. When you remember a name, or a face, or a moment, your brain doesn't pull it out like a photo from a drawer. It rebuilds it, pulling pieces from different regions, assembling them into something coherent, like a jigsaw puzzle, but with some of the pieces smudged, or missing, or stuck under the couch. This is especially true for things like names and faces, which live in separate areas of the brain. The fusiform face area helps you recognize someone visually, while their name might be stored in the temporal lobe, tagged with context and sound. So you can look at someone and think, I know, while the name, just a sound, really won't rise up. It's not failure, it's a mismatch in timing, and it happens to everyone. In fact, as you get older, this experience becomes more common. Not because your brain is losing capacity, but because it's holding more. With age comes more information, more experiences, more names, more faces. The system's full. Not broken, just busy. There's comfort in that. That forgetting someone's name doesn't mean you're falling apart. It means your mind is crowded with living. And even when you do forget, the face still brings something. A memory, a warmth, a shared laugh, even if you can't place it. Because recognition is different from recall. Recognition is a quieter, more intuitive kind of knowing. You don't need to name someone to remember how they met. The brain keeps that separately, deeper, in places that don't need language. This is also why you sometimes forget words mid-sentence, or pause mid-thought, even though you knew what you were about to say. Your brain, always managing thousands of tasks, occasionally drops the thread. It doesn't mean the word is lost, it just slipped under a layer. And like a bubble in water, it'll rise back up when you're not looking for it so hard. That's the irony. The harder you try to remember, the more elusive it becomes. Because stress and self-consciousness trigger areas of the brain that inhibit retrieval. You clench, focus, squint, and the memory shrinks away. But when you relax, move on, let go, the pathways open again. That's why your best ideas, your clearest memories, often return in the shower, or on a walk, or just before sleep. When your mind is loose, and your defenses are down, your brain works best when it's not being checked. There's beauty in that, in knowing that memory isn't forced, it's invited, that it floats up when it feels safe, when the noise quiets down. So what about the memories that never float back? The names you never recall, the stories you once knew, but now feel like someone else's life. They aren't gone, not really, they've just settled into the deeper layers, less accessible, yes, but still there in some form. A trace, an imprint, maybe even a dream, and sometimes, without warning, something small. An old photograph, a tone of voice, a flicker of laughter, will call them back, not as facts, but as feelings, and that's enough. That's more than enough. Because the purpose of memory isn't to be perfect, it's to connect, to keep you grounded in who you are, and tethered, gently, to who you've been, even when you forget a name, even when you blank on a even when the thread disappears, the story remains. And somewhere just beneath the surface, it's still being written, still unfolding, still yours. You were once a child, wide-eyed and curious, absorbing the world one blurry day at a time. You laughed, cried, played, touched everything, asked questions that didn't always have answers. And yet, when you try to remember those earliest years, there's nothing, a fog, a blank space. You might remember a story someone told you, or a photograph you've seen, or the feeling of being small in a big room, but not the raw, first-person memory. Not the details, not like you remember your teenage years, or even yesterday's breakfast. This is infantile amnesia, the universal forgetting of our earliest Most people remember very little, if anything, before the age of 3. A few fragments might reach back to age 4, maybe 5. But the first years, they're silent. So where did those memories go? The truth is, they were likely never formed in the way you think. Your brain in infancy is still under construction. The hippocampus, the part responsible for forming long-term episodic memories, isn't fully developed yet. The prefrontal cortex, essential for organizing and contextualizing those memories, is also immature. It's like trying to take high-definition photos with a camera that hasn't quite finished building its lens. The experiences happened, you lived them, they shaped you, but they didn't get stored in a way that allows you to revisit them consciously. And yet, they're still there, not as scenes you can play back, but as imprints. You don't remember the lullabies your parents sang, but your body remembers the feeling of safety when you were held. You don't recall your first night sleeping alone, but perhaps you still carry a sensitivity to certain sounds in the dark. These are implicit memories, the kind you don't recall, but still carry. Emotional memory, sensory memory, patterned responses. They're stored differently, deeper. They don't form a story, but they shape the storyteller. So in a way, your earliest memories aren't gone. They became part of you. They helped build the foundation. The way you relate to comfort, the way you respond to uncertainty, the way you love, fear, trust. And as you grew, your brain began recording more formally. Language arrived. Structure, the ability to place events in sequence, to say this happened, then. And with that came narrative memory, the kind you can talk about, replay, carry forward. But even then, your brain had to choose, and for some reason, it prefers novelty. Studies show that we remember firsts more clearly. The first day of school, the first time we rode a bike, The first time we were heartbroken, not because they were more vivid, but because they were unfamiliar. Your brain marks new territory with sharper repetition, by contrast, fades into the background. That's why entire stretches of early school or daily routines blur together. But that one moment, that unexpected deep, still shines. Memory loves difference. And childhood, once it becomes routine, begins to compress. You look back and realize the years feel shorter because so much of it was the same, or because you didn't yet have the tools to anchor experience in language and meaning. Still, there's a grief in forgetting those early years. You want to remember your first step, the first time you saw snow, the first time you understood the word no, but you can't, and yet you survived them, which means something in you remembers, deeply, wordlessly. Sometimes, that's enough, because memory isn't just about accessing the past, it's about being shaped by it, and you are. Even now you carry the rhythm of those early years, in the way your nervous system responds to love, in the way your body relaxes at the sound of humming, in the way certain lullabies still make your heart slow down, even if you don't remember ever hearing them before. Your earliest memories may not be available to you as thoughts, but they live in you as truths. So the next time you hold a baby, or hear a child laugh, or feel that strange homesick tug towards something you can't explain, know that it's memory. Not forgotten, just transformed from story into self.
There's a peculiar kind of forgetting that doesn't sting, but rather puzzles. You see someone's face, you know them, you feel it immediately. There's warmth, or familiarity, or maybe even a flicker of affection, but the name, gone. And it's not just names, sometimes it's a place, a detail, a simple word you've used hundreds of times, something basic, obvious. But in the moment your mind pulls up a blank screen. You pause, squint slightly, say, it's on the tip of my tongue. This kind of forgetting isn't deep. It's not like something lost in childhood or suppressed by trauma. It's something you just had, something that was right there until it wasn't. And yet while your brain stumbles, you still remember the feeling, the face, the tone of voice, the way someone walks, that strange multi-dimensional, knowing that doesn't require facts. Because recognition and recall are separate things. Two different systems. Recognition is fast, emotional, immediate. You look at someone and feel familiarity before your brain catches up. It's a pattern-matching process. A whisper that says, we've seen this before. Recall, though, that's slower. That's the process of piecing together details from the warehouse of memory. The act of finding the right shelf, the right box, the right folder, and sometimes, the label has faded. It happens most with proper names, because they're abstract. A name is a sound assigned to a person, but it's not intrinsically linked to their essence. Your brain stores the sound of their voice, the curve of their smile, the way they made you laugh, in one place, and their name in another. So you may remember everything about them, except the word people use to call them. This is also why you remember that a waiter reminds you of your cousin, or that someone's laugh sounds like a friend from school, even if you can't recall either of their names. Memory isn't always organized by logic, it's organized by associations. This is how your brain prefers to store information, not in rows but in webs. So when you try to recall something, your brain doesn't walk down a hallway, it hops across connections, following clues, recreating the memory like a mosaic from scattered tiles. And sometimes, a single tile is missing. That one tile, the word, the name, the date, keeps the rest from feeling complete. But then, hours later, the missing piece slides into place, and you sigh, or laugh, or say it aloud, even though no one is listening, because now the picture feels whole again. This delay is part of something known as blocking, when a memory is encoded and stored, but temporarily inaccessible, like a book in a library you know exists, but can't find in the moment. Blocking isn't forgetting in the classic sense, it's interference, a hiccup in the retrieval process. You can think of it like a traffic jam in the mind. Too many similar memories crowding the pathway. You try to recall the name Rachel, but your brain keeps offering you Rebecca, or Renee. Close, but not quite. And the correct answer is stuck, waiting for the noise to clear. Eventually, it does, and your brain, almost sheepishly, hands you the answer. Hours later, it's a reminder of how much is going on beneath the surface, of how much your mind is still managing, even when you're unaware. And sometimes, the memory never comes. You forget a name, and it stays forgotten, or a detail never resurfaces, and you feel a small loss, like something you once had has quietly slipped through your fingers. But even then, something remains, because you might forget what someone said, but you remember how they said it. You might forget a friend's birthday, but you remember the warmth of their hug. You might forget the layout of your old apartment, but remember the spot where the light came through the window, just right in the late afternoon. These are the emotional traces, the sensory shapes, the architecture of experience that remains even when the specifics fade. And in that way, memory is more forgiving than we think. It lets us forget the details, while holding on to the meaning. So if you can't recall a name, or a word, or a date, don't panic. Your brain is not failing, it's just focused on what truly matters. And sometimes, what matters most isn't what something was called, it's how it made you feel, and that part almost always stays. There's a deeper kind of forgetting, one that unfolds slowly, quietly, like a fog creeping in at the edges of a familiar place. It doesn't come with a jolt or a blank moment, it arrives gently, a soft blur, a gradual erosion of the details that once formed the contours of a person's life. This is what happens in dementia, in Alzheimer's disease, in the slow unweaving of memory that doesn't just affect facts and names, but the very threads of identity. It begins innocently enough, misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, repeating a question you just asked, small lapses that feel like ordinary forgetfulness. But over time, the forgetting begins to layer. The spaces between memory and awareness grow wider. You forget not just what happened, but when, or to whom. Eventually, you might forget the names of people you love, or the year it is, or how to tie your shoes. This kind of forgetting isn't about the mind choosing what to keep. It's about something deeper being slowly taken away. Because diseases like Alzheimer's don't just affect memory, they affect the structure of memory. They physically alter the brain, breaking down neurons, disrupting communication between cells, shrinking the very parts responsible for holding your past. And it's not just memory that goes, it's selfhood. When someone can't recall their history, their family, their habits, their preferences, who are they? That's the heartbreak. Watching a person you know disappear by degrees, while their body is still here. Watching them smile without knowing why, or greet you like a stranger, or sit silently, lost in a room you can't enter. It feels like memory is being unwritten, but that's not quite right, because even in advanced stages of memory loss, some things remain. A song from youth, a favorite food, a reflexive smile at the sound of a loved one's voice. These are signs that not all memory is the same, that some parts of us lie deeper than words, deeper than names. But even when the mind forgets, the body and spirit often remember. That's why music therapy helps patients with dementia, because melodies are often stored differently than language. Music can reach where conversation cannot. A tune can light up a part of the brain that hasn't gone dim yet. And for a moment, someone who has forgotten everything else might sing along. And it's also why touch matters. The warmth of a hand, the rhythm of a hug. These sensations communicate without needing names or explanations. When memory is fractured, the world becomes unfamiliar. But the emotional core, the capacity to feel, to respond, to connect, often outlasts the facts. There is dignity in that. And for caregivers, for loved ones, the grief of memory loss is layered. You grieve the person's past, even while they are still with you. You grieve shared memories that are now one-sided, and yet you continue to show up, to remind, to love, because even if someone cannot remember who you are, they can still feel your presence. They can still feel safe. And in those moments, there's a kind of remembering beyond memory, a presence that transcends recall. We are more than what we remember, and we are more than what we forget. That's what Alzheimer's teaches us in the most painful, beautiful way. That memory is fragile, that identity is dynamic, that love is not diminished by forgetting. And even when memories fade, the imprint of connection often stays. So if you've ever watched someone disappear through the veil of forgetting, know this: they are still there, changed, yes, fading, maybe, but not lost, not completely, because memory doesn't live in isolation, it lives in relation. And as long as someone holds the memory of them, a part of them remains, even in silence, even in stillness, even in the spaces where words no longer reach. There's a question you've probably asked yourself at some point, maybe late at night, maybe during a quiet walk, maybe after forgetting something important. Is it really possible to forget something completely? to lose it so deeply that no trace remains. It feels like the answer should be yes. You forget names, events, whole chapters of your past. Years blur together. Entire friendships fade into vague impressions. You can't remember the way a voice sounded, or what you once believed so strongly. But when scientists study memory, the answer becomes far less certain, because memory isn't so much erased as it is hidden, muted, reorganized. The traces don't disappear entirely. In fact, many remain in the brain, as latent memory, inaccessible through conscious recall, but still present. Like a locked room in a house you still live in. You might not have the key, or even remember what's inside, but it's still there. This is why under hypnosis, or through certain sensory triggers, people can sometimes recall things they thought were long gone. It's why dreams occasionally bring up scenes you haven't thought of in years. The information wasn't destroyed, it was stored differently, quietly, in the background. Neuroscience supports this. Brain imaging shows that even when people can't consciously remember something, their brains sometimes still respond to it. A face, a sound, a word, it lights up recognition pathways, proof that some level of memory is still alive, even if the mind can't reach it. So what we call forgetting may really just be misplaced remembering, a delay, a rewriting, like trying to find a book in a library, where the shelves keep moving. Sometimes the brain does suppress memories deliberately, especially those associated with trauma. It's not erasure, it's a form of emotional anesthesia. The brain knows that to function, to protect, to survive, certain memories have to go dark for a while. But even then, the wiring remains. The neural fingerprints, the echoes in behavior, in dreams, in the way you pause at certain words or flinch at certain sounds. You forget, but not fully. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are memories you want to forget, but can't. Regrets, mistakes, the things you wish you hadn't said, or the moments you wish had ended differently. These don't fade easily, because they're wrapped in emotion, reinforced by repetition, often relived in quiet moments when your guard is down. But even those, over time, can soften. Your brain isn't static. It learns, it rewires, it heals. New experiences create new associations. The same memory, once sharp and painful, can begin to dull, not because it's erased, but because it's recontextualized. You grow around it, you understand it differently, and in doing so you change its place in your story. You don't always need to forget to be free. Sometimes, remembering differently is enough. There's also the strange case of false forgetting, where you think you've forgotten something, but in truth it never registered in the first place. Your attention was elsewhere. The memory was never fully encoded. So when you try to retrieve it later, there's nothing to find. This reminds us that attention is the gateway to memory. If you weren't paying close attention, your brain may never have stored the moment. And that's not forgetting, it's absence. So when you ask, can I truly forget something forever? The honest answer is sometimes, maybe, but not in the clean total way we imagine. Memory leaves traces, imprints, shadows. Sometimes these are faint, sometimes vivid, sometimes buried so deep you may live your entire life without uncovering them. But your brain is always recording, even when you think it isn't. That's why smells hit so hard. Why dreams resurrect people you haven't seen in years. Why you suddenly remember the exact pattern on your childhood blanket, or the tone in your teacher's voice on a rainy Tuesday. The past never quite leaves. It waits, not to haunt you, not to trap you, but to show you who you've been, so that when you need it, when you're ready, it can remind you, gently, quietly, in its own time. Because forgetting isn't always forgetting. Sometimes, it's just remembering, from farther away. Sometimes, you remember something so faint, so small, it almost feels like a trick of the mind, a flicker, a shadow, a tiny, half-formed thought at the edge of sleep, a room from childhood, a particular light, through a window, a sentence someone once said. You don't know why it comes back, or even if it's real, but there it is, and you realize, even when you forget, something remains. Maybe not the memory itself, but the echo. This is the quiet truth of memory. It never disappears entirely. Even the ones that slip from your conscious mind leave traces, shapes, reactions, preferences, patterns. Maybe you don't remember the conversation, but you remember how it made you feel. Maybe you forget the lesson, but live by it anyway. These are the residues of memory. What stays after the details are gone. You forget a person's face, but still smile when you hear their favorite song. You don't remember the birthday party,
but you still feel oddly peaceful around yellow balloons. You can't recall the conversation where someone changed your mind, but the change stayed. This is what memory becomes, eventually. Not a vivid image, but a faint fingerprint. Not a file you can open, but a way you move through the world. And this is why the past still shapes you, even when you can't describe it. The choices you make, the way you respond to kindness, the dreams you return to. These are echoes of a life you've lived, even if the words are no longer there. In this way, forgetting isn't a void, it's a softening, a background hum, a quiet influence. You may never recall the moment you first understood grief, or the exact time someone made you feel safe, but your brain remembers enough to guide you, enough to shape how you listen, how you trust, how you love. That's the hidden grace of memory. It doesn't need to be complete, to be powerful. It just needs to be felt. And what you feel, deeply, wordlessly, tends to last longer than what you simply know. This is why dreams bring back people you haven't thought of in decades. Why you reach for certain colors, or places, or people, without knowing why. Why a smell can unravel a mood you didn't even know you were carrying. And this is why, even as memory fades with age, or slips away through illness, some things endure. Rhythms, rituals, affections, the tone of a lullaby, the way to hold a hand. These are not just memories, they're impressions, not stored on the shelves of the mind, but pressed into its foundation. And they stay when language goes, they stay when faces blur, they stay when dates dissolve into fog, because they were never just facts, they were part of you. So the next time you forget where you put something, or the name of that street, or what you meant to say, pause. You're not fading, you're refining. And even if some memories go, the person they helped build remains, whole, layered, alive. You are not what you remember. You are how you carry what's been remembered, and forgotten, and everything in between.
And sometimes, the echoes that remain are more than enough. So now, as we come to the end of this gentle exploration, maybe you're still thinking about all the memories you've lost, or half lost, or never knew you were holding. Maybe you're remembering someone who remembered you, or forgetting someone you once were. It's okay. The mind forgets to make room, to lighten the load, to let you begin again. And in all the things you no longer remember, you've made space for new days, new people, new kindness, new mistakes. The forgotten moments are not failures. They are part of the rhythm, of ebb and flow, of the way we live, fading, remembering, changing, repeating. So whatever you carry tonight, memory, or silence, clarity, or blur, know that it is enough. You are enough. The story continues, even when you can't recall every page.